The ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, as well as a coalition of nonprofits, have joined calls on Congress to reject the TikTok bill. So the ACLU, in a press release, signed on to a letter with other civil society organizations like Access Now, decrying Congress's ban on TikTok. So last week, the House of Representatives passed a bill known as the Protecting Americans from Foreign Adversary Controlled Applications Act, HR 7521, which will now go to the Senate where its future remains murky. But in its essence, Congress is essentially forcing TikTok to either be sold to an American entity or cease to be able to be allowed to operate within American territory. This comes as Congress has repeatedly indicated concern with the app's ties to the Chinese government. TikTok is owned by Chinese based ByteDance, particularly as it relates to data integrity and security. Although rights groups like the ACLU have called the efforts, quote, censorship and quote, a violation of the First Amendment rights of more than half of the country. So I think data and privacy concerns are real, but technology policy and rights advocates largely consider the sweeping legislation potentially dangerous, ill informed, despite, of course, all the harms of social media that have come to light in recent years. The bill won the overwhelming support of Congress with a 352 to 62 vote. That's an incredible margin there for a bill that was only introduced about 2 weeks ago in the committee. Fascinatingly, it advanced out of committee with a unanimous vote of 50 yes votes. Again, the bill's future remains murky in the Senate. But George, Congress is coming down hard on TikTok. It seems partially out of concerns over data integrity, great, but also seems like it's a little bit of tough on China demagoguery here. What's your take on this? And what should nonprofits be paying attention to?
I think there's also the narrative that the potential to shift political narrative in the country is amazingly potent with TikTok, and they speak to, I think, some of the sentiment shift that is clear on pro-Palestinian bumps and algorithms on TikTok, according to some of the narratives I've heard there. I think this particular, and when you look at the bill, it is broad sweeping. It is not saying TikTok. It is giving a new swath of, some say Patriot Act 2.0 powers to Congress. And so that is concerning. Are we using this as the, canary to close the coal mine? Like, wait a minute, let's say just for TikTok. So I think the ACLU is spot on. I don't think we want these broad sweeping powers to cancel social media websites and applications alike based on a determined percentage ownership by foreign actors. That said, looking at what TikTok actually is, a 2023 Pew study found that one third of adults under 30 look for TikTok as a source of news. A third of adults under 30 are using TikTok as a source of news, not just a social media platform. And that gets into news media outlets, laws governing who can control that in the countries, which is a nuanced difference. But again, none of that nuance is recognized inside of this bill. It is broad sweeping. It is concerning. And I think the ACLU is on the right side of history in this particular battle.
Yeah, George, I think that's exactly correct. And I think that there is a lot of political grandstanding here. If you look at the name of the committee where this bill originated, it's the Committee on the Chinese Communist Party that we have.
Mhm.
That's a
Oh,
real
yeah.
committee in Congress, the Committee on the Chinese Communist
Didn't know
Party.
that.
And I think ultimately it becomes hard to seem soft on China, right? America's number one adversary in political discourse. But I think if Congress was serious about looking at the harms of tech, particularly the harms of tech on society, children, youth, etc., they'd be taking it much more seriously and how Facebook or Twitter or whatever XYZ platform is impacting American society. Because guess what? It's a lot broader than just TikTok. And I think the fact that TikTok is being singled out with this legislation, which again is broad, really just shows that there's not serious engagement with the actual problems of social media here. And it seems largely a ploy for political points with potentially dangerous consequences. We implore listeners to read the letter from American civil society groups. A whole bunch of excellent digital rights nonprofits and NGOs have signed on to this coalition letter. Some of those organizations, Access Now, the ACLU, Center for Democracy and Technology, the Freedom of Press Foundation, et cetera. Really great organizations putting in the work to protecting the internet, which I think, George, is worth mentioning. The modern internet is extremely new. And I think that it's been a wild west for a long time. And in the broader scope of seeing law finally catching up to the internet, it's important that we get it right, because the internet intersects with our lives in, I think, more ways than we're readily able to admit. And getting it right is really important. And I think that this bill is not that.
Agreed.